In today's episode, we explore 3 horrifying stories of people who tragically lost their lives to snake attacks. From a classroom in Africa where Melody Chipura faced a terrifying battle for survival against the venomous black mamba, to Brian West, a snake expert who became too overconfident and learned the price. But first, let's begin with the story of the Barth brothers. It was just another typical summer day in the sleepy town of New Brunswick, Canada in August 2013. For Connor and Noah Barth, 2 young brothers full of energy and adventure, it was no different. It was meant to be a carefree playdate, but who knew all playdates weren't just fun and games? How were the boys supposed to know that one wrong move would ultimately lead to their devastating demise, leaving the town and their family forever changed? On that day, the boys were filled with excitement as they left their home, heading for a friend's place next door. The sun was bright, the air warm, and their minds were set on fun and exploration. The adventure began with a trip to a nearby farm where they enjoyed the simple joy of playing with animals, horses, chickens, and goats. Afterward, the boys headed back to their friend's apartment, which sat above a local reptile store called Reptile Ocean. Little did they know, the place they found so fascinating would be the setting of their untimely demise. The store was owned by Jean-Claude Savoie, a man who was well known in the community for his expertise with reptiles. He'd always been passionate about the creatures he cared for, particularly a massive 13-foot African rock python that had captured the imagination of many who visited the store. The snake, which had been discovered years earlier by the Canadian Wildlife Service, was originally intended to be sent to a zoo. But when the zoo couldn't provide a suitable home, Jean-Claude decided to take the python in, not knowing that this well-meaning act would lead to the tragedy. Jean-Claude housed the python in his apartment in a large glass tank that stretched from the floor to the ceiling. The enclosure was impressive, designed to accommodate the snake's size and needs. But there was one glaring problem: the province did not allow people to keep pythons as pets, and Jean-Claude had no proper permits for such an animal. It was a seemingly minor detail that would soon come back to haunt him. After an afternoon of fun, Noah and Connor were ready to rest. They settled down in the living room of Jean-Claude's apartment, exhausted from their playful day. Their young friend, blissfully unaware of the impending danger, slept soundly in his own room, while the 2 brothers drifted into a peaceful slumber. But just a few feet away, an unseen menace was on the move. The 13-foot python, restless in its enclosure, had been planning its escape. In a series of eerie, methodical movements, the snake managed to free itself from its glass prison. It slithered across the floor with silent determination, its senses sharp. The snake's eyes gleamed and its flicking tongue detected something. A high vent on the wall, once sealed, had been tampered with by Jean-Claude a few days earlier. In an innocent act, he'd removed the vent filter cap, an error that would later prove catastrophic. The snake, drawn by unfamiliar smells, made its way toward the vent, squeezing its head into the exposed opening. With terrifying precision, the python navigated the ventilation system that ran above the room where the brothers lay sleeping. Its massive body coiled through the narrow pipes, adapting to the cramped space, unaware that its weight was too much for the delicate air ducts to support. The snake, nearly 100 pounds and over 14 feet long, inched its way closer to its unsuspecting prey. Inside the room, Connor and Noah lay next to each other, unaware that their lives were on the line. The room was quiet, the air was still. The boys were fast asleep, their small bodies curled up against the comfort of a peaceful night. They had no idea that above them the python was poised to strike. The ceiling above them groaned and the fragile panels in the ventilation system finally gave way. In an instant, the massive snake crashed to the floor, landing on the boys with shocking force. The brothers' screams were immediate. It drowned out the overwhelming power of the snake's coils. The python constricted around them, its muscular body wrapping tighter with each passing second. It was fast, much faster than anyone could have imagined. With its enormous strength, it squeezed the life out of the two boys, who fought helplessly for air. They were trapped in the python's grasp. Its bite sank into their tender skin. They couldn't breathe. In those harrowing minutes, the boys slipped away, their small bodies no match for the power of the predator. By morning, Jean-Claude entered the room to check on the children. His heart sank as he saw them lying motionless on the floor, pale and lifeless. Blood stained their bodies, and the faintest signs of trauma marked their necks and chests. Jean-Claude's mind raced as panic set in. Something was terribly wrong, and the python was nowhere to be found. His immediate reaction was to call the boy's mother, who lived just next door. Her partner rushed over, but it was already too late. The boys were gone. As Jean-Claude opened the door to let in the paramedics, he was visibly shaken, his hands trembling with blood. Whether it was his or the boys', no one knew for sure. His fear was palpable. The snake, having done its terrible work, had disappeared without a trace. The medical examiners later confirmed that the deaths were caused by the python's constriction. Connor's body bore multiple bite marks and bruises from the snake's deadly assault. Noah's body was similarly marked. The python, having not eaten for over a day, had acted out of instinct, coiling around its prey with ruthless efficiency. But as investigators delved deeper into the circumstances, a darker question arose. Was this truly just an accident? The public and experts alike began to scrutinize the events. Some believed that the snake had been drawn in by the scent of farm animals the boys had interacted with earlier that day. Jim Harrison, the director of the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, suggested that a snake of this size could have easily overpowered both boys at once. But other reptile experts disagreed. They pointed out that pythons rarely attack unless they feel threatened, and there was no evidence that the snake had tried to eat the boys. It seemed unlikely that a snake, after falling from the ceiling, would immediately target the two boys without making any noise. The situation was further complicated when Jean-Claude's behavior came under scrutiny. When the police arrived, he was seen pacing nervously outside the apartment. His hands and head were covered in blood, but no one could tell whether it was his or the boys'. If it was his, why was he bleeding? Did he try to fight off the snake, or had something else happened? Was it a tragic accident, or was there more to the story than met the eye? For 18 months, the case hung in limbo. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police finally arrested Jean-Claude, charging him with criminal negligence in February 2015. But when the trial came to court in November 2016, the jury found him not guilty. Despite the court's ruling, the loss of Connor and Noah remained an unhealable wound for their parents. The photos shared by their mother, Mandy Tricardin, were heartbreaking. They showed two vibrant, joyful boys smiling as they cleaned the python's enclosure just days before their deaths. The brothers had loved spending time with Jean-Claude and his reptiles, not knowing that one of those very creatures would become the agent of their destruction. In the end, the court ruled it as a tragic accident, hoping others would learn from the mistake. But no matter the verdict, the grief of losing two children could never be undone. The family's pain would endure, and the memory of Connor and Noah, two boys whose lives were stolen in the blink of an eye, would never fade. But they weren't the only ones. The next story is about an innocent 17-year-old Melody Chipura who was followed by a snake infatuated with her energy, only to meet a similar fate. On January 12, 2023, Melody Chipura, a 17-year-old student at Rushinga High School in northern Zimbabwe, kissed her parents goodbye before leaving for school, just like any other day. What they couldn't know, what no one could have possibly predicted, was that this would be the last time they would see their daughter alive. Rushinga, a region known for its sprawling hills and proximity to the Zambezi River, was a quiet and peaceful place. Melody was a bright, driven young woman, eager to finish her advanced level exams. She loved helping at the school's events, often volunteering for cooking and catering duties. As the school year progressed, Melody's focus on her studies was unwavering. She had big dreams, one of which was to become a psychologist. It was a typical Thursday morning when the events that would change everything began to unfold. After the festive holiday season, students were settling back into their routine. As usual, Melody and her classmates were outside playing sports on the school's playing field. Their laughter and shouts echoed across the grounds, filling the air with the sounds of youth and energy. But unbeknownst to the students, the earth beneath their feet was shaking with the movement of something much darker, something deadly. The culprit was one of the most feared snakes in all of Africa, the black mamba. Named for the black inside of its mouth, this snake is not only dangerous but swift, aggressive, and equipped with venom so potent that a single bite can kill 6 grown men. Measuring up to 9 feet in length, the black mamba is an apex predator in its own right. Though typically shy and inclined to avoid human contact, when threatened or cornered, it will strike without hesitation, injecting venom that attacks the nervous system, causing paralysis, respiratory failure, and death. Though the school grounds didn't typically serve as black mamba territory, being far from the snake's preferred habitat of tall grass or sugarcane fields, something had drawn the snake toward the school that afternoon. Whether it was the vibrations of the children playing or perhaps the scent of something that promised prey, the snake moved in silence, unnoticed by anyone. It was as if fate had chosen that day, that moment, to deliver a cruel twist. The snake, undetected by the students, slowly made its way up the concrete steps of the school building. The noise of the children outside had likely startled it, and it slithered its way inside the calm, quiet school. Through the open doors it moved, finding its way down the empty corridors of the building. Meanwhile, Melody and her classmates were finishing up their sports activities, their energy slowly winding down as the school day was about to end. Just before 4 p.m., the bell signaling the end of the day would soon ring. The students trickled back into their classrooms, eagerly awaiting dismissal. Melody entered her classroom, unaware of the silent threat that had already taken refuge on the floor by her chair. The snake, lying still in the corner, was waiting, its instincts sharp and ready. As Melody sat down and waited for her teacher, the atmosphere was calm. The hum of the afternoon seemed far away. But then it came. A sharp, excruciating pain exploded in her thigh. It was unlike anything she had ever felt. She glanced down only to find herself staring into the unblinking black eyes of the black mamba. Slowly, deliberately, the snake's head rose from its body, its black mouth gaping open, tongue flicking in and out, hissing menacingly. Melody froze. Before Melody could fully comprehend the danger, the snake struck again. A piercing scream echoed through the classroom as Melody cried out, her voice filled with terror. Her classmates turned in horror, witnessing the nightmare unfolding before them. The snake, with its menacing strike, was now fully engaged in its deadly attack. Panic set in. Students screamed in fear and leaped out of the windows to escape. Teachers rushed to Melody's side, but the venom was already making its way through her body. In those frantic moments, the reality of the situation became all too clear. Time was running out. Within 5 minutes, Melody was being rushed to the nearest medical clinic, Ringa Medical Clinic, but it felt miles away. The snake was unmistakably a black mamba, and everyone knew the gravity of the situation. But the worst thing of all, the black mamba was nowhere to be found anymore. It's like he slithered into an invisible corner. Melody's chances of survival depended on immediate access to antivenom. In Africa, where access to healthcare can be scarce, especially in rural areas, time is often the difference between life and death. The black mamba's venom worked swiftly, racing toward the victim's central nervous system, paralyzing the muscles needed for basic bodily functions, including breathing. If untreated, the victim can die within hours. As Melody was transported to the clinic, the venom spread. First, a tingling sensation spread from the bite on her thigh to her entire leg. Within moments, the paralysis began. Her breathing became labored and her body struggled to function as the venom worked its way through her bloodstream. The poison blocked the transmission of nerve signals to the muscles, preventing her from moving and breathing. Melody's body was shutting down. The venom was winning. The world around her began to fade. Her parents were contacted, and by the time they reached the clinic, just 20 minutes after the bite, it was already clear that the situation was dire. Desperate, they had brought an herbal healer along, hoping for some miracle. But in the face of such a potent toxin, herbs were no match. The black mamba's venom was too strong, too fast. The local Chimhanda hospital was also alerted, and the staff prepared to receive Melody in hopes of administering antivenom if it was available. But despite all efforts, Melody never made it there. She died just 30 minutes after the snake bite before anyone could administer the treatment that might have saved her. The tragedy shocked the entire community. How could this have happened? The snake, once spotted by a villager earlier in the day, had been attacked by someone, but it had slithered off, seeking refuge in the school. Some speculated that the snake might have been looking for shelter from the heat of the day, choosing the cool confines of the classroom as a safe haven. But no explanation seemed to make sense. How did a black mamba end up inside a building so far from its typical habitat? For Melody's parents, the loss was devastating. Melody had been full of life, with a bright future ahead of her. She had always been active, helping others, and had dreams of becoming a psychologist. But in a cruel twist of fate, those dreams were shattered in a split second. Her father, Joseph Chipura, a ZANU PF counselor in Rishinga, was left to mourn the loss of his only daughter. He described her as an ambitious, kind-hearted young woman with a passion for helping others. She had been excited for the future, full of plans and aspirations that would never come to fruition. The shock of the event rippled through the community. The black mamba, a creature known for its deadly venom and swift movements, had taken a life so quickly, so unexpectedly. And though medical staff worked tirelessly to try and save her, there was nothing anyone could do in the face of such a deadly force of nature. But Melody wasn't the only one to come face to face with a deadly snake. Our next story takes us to Brian, a seemingly ordinary man with an unhealthy obsession with snakes, one that led him down a dangerously dark path. On May 29, 1992, 25-year-old Brian Leslie West, a self-proclaimed snake expert from Emmitsburg, Maryland, was about to face a moment that would forever change his life and the lives of those who knew him. He was well known for knowing everything there is to know about snakes and their venom. Brian was respected and admired by many, but that fateful day, everything changed. Despite his years of experience handling some of the deadliest creatures on the planet, Brian made a decision that altered the course of his life forever. It was a mistake, a fleeting moment of carelessness. What happened next? In a world of predators and prey, could one small mistake be enough to rewrite everything? Brian's story begins in Emmitsburg, a small town nestled in the rolling hills of Maryland. From an early age, Brian's fascination with reptiles was undeniable. As a child, he spent countless hours exploring the forest and fields surrounding his home, seeking out snakes, lizards, and other creatures. His fascination with these often misunderstood animals grew into a lifelong obsession. He didn't see snakes as terrifying predators, but rather as remarkable creatures that deserved respect and understanding. As he got older, Brian's passion led him to the Western Maryland Herpetological Society, where he found a community of like-minded individuals who shared his love for reptiles. The society became a platform for Brian, where he could not only learn from seasoned experts but also teach others about the importance of understanding reptiles. Through his work with the society, Brian made lifelong friends, traveled on field trips, and helped organize educational programs aimed at debunking the myths and misconceptions about snakes. Brian's knowledge wasn't limited to just appreciating snakes from a distance. He became an expert in snake bite treatment, a skill that would later become central to his life's work. His expertise was sought after by paramedics and healthcare professionals, and he frequently gave demonstrations on how to treat snake bites. He took great pride in his ability to educate others on how to handle these venomous creatures, and his skills saved many lives over the years. But despite his expertise and caution when handling snakes, Brian's fate would be sealed on a fateful day in 1992, when his love for reptiles led him into the path of danger. The day began like any other. Brian had been called to assist with an Indian cobra, a venomous snake known for its hood and deadly bite. Indian cobras are one of the big four species responsible for the majority of snake bites in India, and their venom is powerful enough to cause paralysis and cardiac arrest. It was rare for an Indian cobra to lay eggs in captivity, and Brian had been asked to help facilitate the process, as these snakes were notoriously difficult to breed in such conditions. Brian knew the risks. He had worked with venomous snakes for years. The job was dangerous, there was no denying that. He understood the importance of the task, but he also knew that working with a creature as deadly as the Indian cobra came with perilous consequences. Even though he had handled countless venomous snakes in the past, this time was different. The stakes were higher. The cobra was no ordinary snake. This was a snake capable of taking a life in minutes. Its venom could paralyze the body, shut down organs, and stop the heart. Brian was in the dimly lit room, surrounded by tanks and cages filled with reptiles. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the quiet hiss of snakes. He had arranged everything carefully. His colleagues, fellow snake enthusiasts, were gathered around a space on the ground equipped with everything they might need in case of emergencies: anti-venom, a cage, and some sharp tools. The Indian cobra, a majestic yet dangerous creature, was lying on the ground in front of him. This was no ordinary snake. Indian cobras rarely laid their eggs in captivity, and Brian had worked tirelessly to create the perfect environment for the process. He wasn't thinking about himself. His dedication to the task kept him moving forward. But in his determination to complete the job, Brian made a fatal mistake. He let his guard down, just for a split second. It was all it took. The Indian cobra lay on the ground, seemingly calm, while Brian hovered above it. He thought it was dead. He believed it based on a similar situation he had encountered before with another cobra that died just a couple of days before laying eggs. His experience with snakes gave him confidence. He thought he knew what he was doing, but he was wrong. As Brian rose from his couch, slowly moving away from the snake, something shifted. He turned his attention away just for a second. That's when it happened. The cobra struck. The movement was quick, it was direct, and it was brutal. Before Brian could react, the venomous fang sank deep into his foot. The pain was immediate. Sharp, unrelenting, it burned. But Brian didn't think about his own pain. His first thoughts weren't for himself. He wasn't concerned with the agony surging through his body. Instead, his mind raced to the snake, the very creature that had just bitten him. "Secure the cobra," he urged his colleagues, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding inside him. "Make sure no one else gets hurt." His hands moved quickly even as the pain began to spread. His thoughts remained clear, focused on the task at hand. He directed his friends to lock the cobra back in its cage. Once the cobra was safe from the panic of the venom bite, Brian finally felt his pain. Calm, still in control, he said to secure the cobra before the paramedics arrived. But as he spoke, he felt the venom working its way through his veins. He had a vial of anti-venom in his pocket. It was from a previous snakebite incident, one that hadn't been nearly as severe. He had always been prepared, but this time was different. The amount of venom coursing through his body was far too much. Even his extensive knowledge couldn't change that. Brian knew it. He could feel it. The venom was moving quickly. He began to feel dizzy, weak. His breath came in short gasps. His body started to shut down, but Brian tried to remain calm. There was no time to waste. His thoughts were still focused on the snake. He knew the venom would kill him, but he wanted to make sure the cobra was contained. He had always put the animals before himself, and now in his final moments, he was doing the same. Brian's father, Larry West, later recalled how his son had always placed the well-being of the animals before his own. Larry talked about how Brian was always concerned for the animal no matter what. It was an innate trait of his that he just couldn't shake. That's the way he's always been with them. They were one of his great loves. If he had survived, he'd have gone back and tried the same thing tomorrow. The irony of Brian's death was not lost on those who knew him. He was a man who had dedicated his life to studying and understanding snakes, someone who had trained others on how to handle the most venomous of creatures. But in the end, it was one of those very creatures, the one he had sought to help, that would take his life. Despite the frantic rush of Brian's loved ones to get him some medical attention, nothing could be done. Within 5 short minutes of the bite, Brian's body began to give way to the venom that coursed through his veins. He never made it to the hospital. He died in the very place he hoped to bring life into the world. Even before the paramedics arrived, the man who had spent his life studying snakes, who had saved countless lives with his knowledge, now found himself unable to save his own. It was too fast, too sudden. Brian's death was a devastating loss. When death is lingering at your doorstep, no amount of knowledge or preparation can save anyone. Not just to his family, but to everyone who had known him. He was more than just a snake expert. He was a mentor, a friend, and a passionate teacher who sought to change how people view the creatures he loved. To the reptile community, his loss was profound. He had worked tirelessly to demystify the world of snakes, to remove the fear and misconception that surrounded them. Now, that mission, his life's work, was left unfinished. For those who were closest to him, the pain of his death was unbearable. His wife, Stephanie Brennan, faced the overwhelming grief of losing the man she had shared her life with. Now she was left with a void, a pain so raw, so deep that it felt as though it would never fade. The journey toward healing was long and agonizing. The days seemed endless as she clung to the memories of the time they had shared. As time passed, the pain became more manageable, but it never truly left. In the years that followed, Brian's collection of over 50 exotic snakes, ranging from Burmese pythons to asps and rattlesnakes, was carefully preserved and placed in zoos and other collections, continuing his legacy in a way he would have wanted. The reptiles Brian loved so much were honored through the work of those who followed in his footsteps. Though Brian's life ended in tragedy, his story remains a powerful testament to his passion for both snakes and education. His commitment to ending the stigma surrounding reptiles was far more than a personal mission. It was a crusade to change perceptions and show the world the beauty and value of these misunderstood creatures. Brian often spoke of his deep belief that snakes were not something to fear, but creatures to respect and understand. He would proudly declare, "I have never been bitten. They're great things. People are much too afraid of them." He must have jinxed himself. Yet, even in his last moments, his life wasn't as important as the snakes. This goes to show how love can truly conquer all. Thank you for watching, but this is just the beginning. Up next, we take you deeper into the stories of 3 more individuals who, like the Barth brothers Melody and Brian, seemed to fall victim to a fate they could never have predicted. If only they'd done things differently, who knows, maybe they'd still be here to tell a very different tale. So don't wait, click over now. We'll see you there. Just beware the dangers we least expect are lurking just around the corner.